Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The best part about attending my wife's office party was the opportunity to push my Challenger to its limits. The downside was that the faster I drove, the quicker I'd arrive. The event was at a cabin in the woods, and there was this perfect 20-meter stretch of road leading up to it. No stop signs, no lights, no traffic, just an open road waiting for the Dodge to unleash its power. The downside? No gas stations or Jiffy stores along the way. Diana and I had been drifting apart ever since our daughters got married. Though I had hoped things would go in the opposite direction, Diana insisted I come to the ceremony, even though I made it clear I wasn't interested. She used to go alone. Diana liked to drink, but I didn't. I'd occasionally have a beer, but that was it. She was a social butterfly, and I wasn't. Over the past year, I had a gut feeling she was having an affair. By this point, I didn't care. In fact, I think that's part of what caused us to drift apart. I was just biding my time, waiting for a way out of an unhappy relationship. I have to admit, I was probably a big reason Diana went looking for something more. I'm a minimalist of sorts. I grew up in a poor family where my brothers and I had far less than other kids our age. Things like bicycles, toys, pets, and fancy electronics. It was almost like living Amish, minus the religion. I wasn't ignorant. I understood how the world worked, but I couldn't bring myself to accept it. I knew it was important to stay out of debt, pay bills, and save for retirement to live comfortably. As a minimalist, you don't have to be extreme, but you do have to keep yourself in check while allowing yourself a few indulgences to appear normal to most people. My biggest struggle was marriage and family. I had a tough time finding a woman who could tolerate my eccentricities and accept my uniqueness. Diana came from a similar background and was used to living modestly, though she didn't embrace it the way I did. Over time, though, she adapted. As the years passed, she became less frugal, and while I didn't like it, I understood. Especially after the girls were born. We bought a small, practical house and started dressing better. Diana got her hair done more often and became skilled at grooming and makeup. We upgraded to the latest smartphone models, and as the girls grew older, Diana took a minimum wage office job. We needed transportation, so we bought her a small Honda Civic, just like mine. Her salary almost covered the car payment, lunch, and a new wardrobe. My name is Edward Adams, one of the most common names around. I work for a local company that makes industrial compressors. It's a monotonous job, but I'm content with it. The position and pay are fine. Sometimes, I was offered promotions, but I turned them down. I never told Diana about my second affair. I kept it to myself. I felt it was smart to save for retirement whenever I could, so I invested in gold, 1-ounce Krugerrands. I had more than 30 of them stored away in a safe, and I was just getting started. Finally, I let myself indulge in a 1970 Dodge Challenger. Diana did well at Kingston Industrial and received regular bonuses and promotions. The first year, she talked about her job a lot, but eventually, she stopped mentioning it altogether. I knew something was off, but I couldn't figure out what. Tonight, I was hoping to get a better understanding of the situation. The party was a weekend event, and I felt out of place just being there. I had dated all of her co-workers at some point, and I didn't like any of them. We pulled off the highway in Holbrook, and I finally let the Challenger open up. Diana was uncomfortable with the speed, but she kept quiet. Yes, I was speeding, but I didn't care. Bill, what's the rush? We've got plenty of time to get there. Why don't you slow down a little? She asked. I'm not in a hurry to get there, I replied. You know damn well I didn't want to go at all. I'm just using this time to clean the engine. A car needs a good run every now and then, so please try not to spoil my mood. This weekend is important for my career. Why? What do you mean by that? Why is it so crucial for me to attend this corporate event? Bill, you need to understand my new role at the company so you can give me the support and attention I need to do my job. I still don't get it. I'm sure Mrs. Thompson will be able to explain it to you once we get there. Mabel Thompson was the wife of the company president, Grant Everett Thompson. They were old money, old business. I've always supported you, though. What's changed? My new position has a lot of unique responsibilities. Mabel said you should gradually familiarize yourself with them so you can fully understand. It might be difficult at first, but she assured me you'll get the hang of it by the time we arrive. By the time we got to the lodge, my adrenaline was through the roof. It didn't take a genius to figure out what Diana was trying to say. The weekend was shaping up to be interesting. When we arrived, Diana entered the lodge, leaving me to carry the bags. I felt like I'd been put on display. Hey, nice wheels, Mr. Adams. It was Travis Morgan, the only decent worker in their office. Hello, Travis. How's it going? Travis introduced me to his wife, Lila. They were sitting on the front porch, while everyone else seemed to be inside. I glanced around the parking lot, noting about 16 cars and one old truck parked at the end of the lot. For the next 5 minutes, we talked about the Challenger. What are you doing outside? Why aren't you and Lila inside with the others? They're not our kind of people, Mr. Adams. We were hoping to leave early, but Mrs. Thompson insists we stay. We came in early to help set up, and the vendors left about an hour ago. You'll have to explain what's going on. Something feels off, but I don't know exactly what it is. I don't want to upset you, but I think it has something to do with your wife. Are you staying the whole weekend? No, that's why I parked my truck on the side of the road, so I don't have to worry about it when we leave. This was getting more interesting by the minute. All right, I better get these bags to our room. Let me know before you leave, okay? Sure, Mr. Adams. Be careful. Don't do anything stupid. Fortunately, it was only 2 small bags. As I walked into the cabin, Mrs. Thompson caught my eye, smiled, and waved. Diana was waiting for me at the top of the stairs, looking a little annoyed that it had taken me so long to get inside. It's about time, Bill. We have a few hours to get ready for tonight. Clean up and put on something presentable. It's going to be a special night, and I want it to be perfect. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a walk around the house to calm down. I'll be right back. I smirked as I left the room. The slight chill made my walk more pleasant. By my count, there were indeed 16 cars. Most of them were Mercedes, with a few Jaguars and Lexuses. 4 of the cars had out-of-state plates. I was confused. How could my wife, or rather, we, fit in with people of this caliber? We were definitely out of our depth here. Something wasn't right. I noticed Travis and Lila loading their bags into the truck. I waved and walked over to chat. I see Mrs. Thompson has decided to let you go. Not quite. We're kind of slipping away. I'm not comfortable here, Mr. Adams. Travis thought about staying, but I talked him out of it, Lila said quickly. Could you do me a small favor and stay here until after the buffet tonight? I'm a little nervous, and I'd really appreciate it. I had no idea what was going on, but I didn't like it. Great minds think alike, don't they, Lila? I said, trying to make light of it, though my humor was weak. She blushed slightly. I think I can manage. There'll be crabs and oysters, I added. Sounds good, Travis said. I dressed as Diana had insisted, and before we reached the buffet, the hostess took me aside. We're so glad you decided to come tonight to support Diana. This is a big step in her career, and it's important that she has your full support. The pay and benefits increases are significant, and I'm sure you'll be pleased with that. Pardon me for asking, but what position are we talking about? Diana was a little evasive when I asked her about it. She usually just waves me off and says to wait until tonight. It's okay, Edward. I think she just wants to surprise you. You didn't answer my question. There's no official title. I suppose you could just call her the personal assistant. I see. Well, the buffet looks great. Thank you for explaining. Mrs. Thompson. Mabel, please. Just call me Mabel. I spent the next hour trying everything on the line. Diana was busy socializing with important people. So Travis, Lila, and I had some time to ourselves. We were just about to pack up when Mrs. Thompson entered. Edward, Diana mentioned you came by tonight in your sports car. Would you mind taking us for a little drive with a drink? I smiled and nodded. There are 3 cases of wine at the ABC store in Holbrook. They've already been paid for, so you just need to pick them up. There shouldn't be any issues, but if there are, just give me a call. Make sure you have your cell phone with you. I'd be happy to, Mabel. I'll let Diana know and head out soon. After she left, I turned to Travis. I'll meet you outside in 5 minutes. Diana only smiled when I told her that Mrs. Thompson had asked me to help. Her only comment was, don't forget your phone. Interestingly, both she and Mrs. Thompson had emphasized that. Travis, I need a favor, I said, tossing him the keys to the Challenger. Are you serious? He asked. Go to Holbrook and pick up the 3 cases of wine from the ABC store for Mrs. Thompson. I think there might be some delay, so if anything goes wrong, I want to be prepared. Travis smiled and nodded. Here's my cell. Just put it on the dashboard. If it rings, don't answer it. Don't turn it off either. Got it. How long do you need to be gone? At least 2 hours. Fill up on gas before you head back. Enjoy the ride. It was a little chilly outside, but I had put on a comfortable jacket. Now, all I had to do was wait and watch from various spots on the back porch. I could see most of the cabin's interior. A thermos of coffee would have been nice, but I hadn't thought ahead. I found a good spot to observe without being seen. Diana was the center of attention, laughing and embarrassing herself like a movie star. About 20 minutes later, Mrs. Thompson and Diana were looking at Diana's cell phone. I knew they were checking my location. Thanks to Travis, I'm almost a Holbrook. He must have texted them. They smiled as Mrs. Thompson raised her hand to speak. I couldn't make out what was said, but everyone in the room seemed to quietly approve, like soft applause. Grant walked over, took Diana's hand, and headed up the main staircase. At the top, they stopped, raised their hands as a victory salute, and laughed as they ascended. The room erupted in cheers. It was about an hour and a half before the challenger returned. I decided to take my time. I always carried my trusty penknife with a sharp blade. I looked around and started with the cars closest to the house. No hurry. I carefully pocketed the valve stems, not wanting to lose anything and trying not to block the driveway with them. I had 16 cars and 64 valve stems to deal with. I had almost an hour left. What to do? 4 of the cars were locked, but the rest were unlocked. I started taking the registration papers from the glove compartments and visors. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but I figured they might come in handy someday. With 30 minutes to spare before Travis got back, I decided to strip the valve stems from the spare tires. I also had access to the trunks, so I spent the next 20 minutes collecting 10 more valve stems. 2 cars didn't have spare tires. I knew it was petty and childish, but it gave me a mild satisfaction. I wasn't a fan of confrontation, so I kept everything I did low and mean. I didn't need to prove myself. Let the alpha males take on that role. 20 minutes later, the challenger returned. Travis and Lila seemed to have enjoyed the ride. Travis confirmed there had indeed been a delay at the ABC store, just as I had anticipated. It seemed it had been pre-planned. While they were gone, no one called my cell phone. I turned it off and removed the SIM card. They seemed eager to get home, so I thanked Travis, wished him a safe journey, and advised him to find another job as soon as possible. I was sure the wine cases had been quite expensive, but that problem was easily handled. I placed all 3 crates on the porch of the gatehouse. No way did I want to be accused of theft. The drive home was relaxing. There wasn't much in the house that was of importance to me. Just some personal papers, a laptop, and the Kruger. At first, I had planned to set the house on fire before leaving, but that would have turned Diana into a martyr, and I didn't want that. 2 hours later, I was on my way. I didn't feel the need to leave a traditional note or wedding ring. Let her deal with it herself. I wasn't in any rush and had no specific destination in mind. After being on the road for 2 days, Monday morning I called work to give notice and requested that my final paycheck be sent to my parents. They weren't happy about me leaving without any warning, but I apologized and didn't bother explaining further. A good breakfast at Waffle House was always a highlight, and on the way out, I bought a local newspaper. I found an ad for a local supermarket looking for help to load shelves between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. After breakfast, I checked out the market. It was located in a quirky old Chattanooga neighborhood, so I spent the next hour driving around. The area had a mix of old craftsman cottages and a few mobile homes. I could have been content in a small trailer, but I wanted to take it a step further. Then, I spotted a sign offering a garage apartment for rent. I hadn't yet inquired about the job, but I didn't want to miss the chance on the apartment. The garage wasn't included in the rent, but when I offered an extra $50 a month, they agreed. The apartment was small, a 1-bedroom with no shower, but it came furnished with a bed, dresser, table, and chairs. The rent was reasonable, and the place was adequate, so I decided to take it. I'd figure out the bathroom situation later. At least I had a garage for the challenger. The job situation at the supermarket was a bit different. They had plenty of challengers, but not enough to leave them overnight without concern. I explained my situation to the owner and didn't hold back. What finally secured the job for me was offering to work off the books, with no benefits, and at $1 less than they had originally offered. They didn't even ask for my social security number. I was happy, and they were happy. The job was a 10-minute walk from the apartment. The rest of the day was spent getting settled in my new home. The landlord gave me access to his internet, which was a nice touch. After a quick trip to the local Goodwill, I picked up some kitchen supplies and a small microwave. I also grabbed linens and cleaning supplies. That evening, I canceled my insurance policies. I decided not to deal with banks or credit cards. There wasn't much they could do, and I figured I'd avoid complications. Both of our daughters were married, which made my departure a little easier. No grandchildren yet, but I was sure it wouldn't be long. I called my daughter Nina to let her know I was okay, and asked her to help her mother if needed. Nina already knew I had left, but Diana hadn't shared any further details. She promised to inform her sister, Caroline. I deleted all calls from my wife and turned my phone off again. I needed a shower, maybe tomorrow. Things weren't perfect. I still needed to find a safe place for my gold. It wasn't essential, but it was important to me for some reason. I got a safe deposit box in Huntsville, Alabama, hoping it wouldn't be linked back to me in Chattanooga. Of course, I was wrong about that, but I figured it was worth trying. The drive was almost 2 hours, but that's what I expected. The garage door at the apartment was secure, but I added a new deadbolt and heavy-duty lock just to be safe. I needed protection. It didn't take long for me to settle into my new job. I had a man working with me for the first 3 nights, but after 2 weeks, I was on my own. Everything was under control by then. For $20 a month, I got a membership to Planet Fitness, which took care of my shower situation. I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and after work, I either jogged for 20 minutes or walked for 30 to get to the gym. At first, I just used the showers, but eventually, I started using the exercise equipment. By the end of the first month, I was spending almost 2 hours at the gym every day. I felt better, lost a little weight, and was happy with my new routine. The job was monotonous, but it was different, and I enjoyed the freedom it gave me. I did my job and was left to my own devices. Without a TV, I used a second-hand desktop computer with a good monitor. I didn't cook much, but I noticed my eating habits had shifted toward a keto diet, though it wasn't intentional. After 3 months, I was feeling better and had lost some weight. It was time to reach out to my daughters. I called Caroline first. "Hi, Caroline, it's your father. Well, it's about time. We've all been worried about you. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I just wanted to check in on your mom. She's doing great. She got a promotion at work and loves her job. She's really mad at you, though. She said you left her at the celebration and then left the house like a hurt little boy. Those were her words. She said you were jealous of her success. I'm sorry, but that's all she's told me. She says things are tough without your income, but her raise is covering it. She's fine. Well, I'm glad she's doing well. Did she tell you anything about her new job?" "Just that she's making more money and traveling a lot." I paused for a moment, then Caroline asked, "Are you coming home for Christmas?" "I don't think so. I'll try to send something for you and Nina." "We don't need anything, Dad. We'd rather have you here." "I'm sorry, Caroline. I've got to go. Say hi to Nina for me." "Bye." I felt a bit depressed. It seemed like my daughters thought I was the cause of all the problems, but I didn't feel obligated to explain myself. Diana wasn't showing any remorse, and I couldn't understand why my daughters wanted me to come home. I spent the weekend feeling down, and my beer consumption was increasing. As the weeks went by, things were going well. I was doing a good job, and even got a promotion. I was given full discretion over my responsibilities, and in a short time, I had streamlined and improved the store's restocking system. The general computer system was already handling most of it, but they seemed to appreciate my manual input. My accommodations were perfect for my situation and well within my budget. My weight was dropping, and I was building muscle. My appearance was changing too, longer hair, a bit of a scruffy look, and I even began to question my six-pack of cans. At the gym, things were progressing. I was building muscle, and the workouts were getting easier. I also made a few acquaintances, but I was cautious around women. I didn't want any problems with their partners. One person, however, stood out. Her name was Henry, or at least that's what everyone called her. She was around 45, sturdy-looking, and always wore sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Unlike other women at the gym, she didn't show off her body in tight outfits. She was the only one who spoke to me, or even looked my way. I didn't encourage it, but I didn't push her away either. It was a little flattering. Several months went by without me contacting my wife or daughters. I made trips to Huntsville to add to my Krugerrand collection, but then something unexpected happened. One day, Henry came up to me at the gym. "Edward, can I talk to you for a minute?" It was unusual for her to use my full name. Everyone else called me Bill. Sure. What's up?" "I have a corporate meeting to attend Friday night, and I need an escort. I'll cover all expenses, and I need someone to come with me. I noticed you don't drive, so I'll provide transport, and if necessary, I'll reimburse you for any expenses." I was caught off guard. "I have a few skeletons in my closet, though," I admitted. "If you can get around that, I'd be happy to help." She smiled. "What's the problem?" "First, I'm married." "Oh," she replied, surprised. "I didn't know that. That's a little weird." "It's not what you think," I said. "I haven't seen or spoken to my wife in over 9 months. I don't even know if we're still married." She raised an eyebrow. "Did you file for separation or divorce?"
No.
"What else?" "I don't have anything appropriate to wear. No suit, no jacket, no regular shoes. Don't worry about it. I can take care of that. I'm asking because I think you'll be good company for the event. I work nights, but I think I can get a free night with no problem. I'll make it work." "Great. Also, do you want to shave? I like your beard and hair, but you're a bit scruffy." "Would you mind if I had my stylist take a look at you Friday afternoon?" "A stylist?" I groaned, but nodded. "Okay." And so began my professional relationship with Henry, also known as Harlan Carter, attorney at law. On Tuesday, I found myself at Andrew L. Collins, which wasn't exactly top tier, but it was a step up from anywhere I had shopped before. Henry had arranged the visit ahead of time. I ended up buying 2 pairs of pants, 2 sports jackets, a couple of shirts, and some ties. I felt a bit uneasy when I added 2 turtlenecks to the pile, but I'd always liked them and thought they'd look good with the sport coats. Henry had already taken care of the bill. On the way home, I grabbed a new pair of shoes and some underwear to replace the ones I'd outgrown after my weight loss. The moccasins I chose were stylish but still comfortable. Friday came, and my visit to the stylist went smoothly. The stylist was easy to talk to and did a great job. He trimmed my beard neatly and turned my ponytail into a modified mullet, shorter on the sides but longer in the back. He assured me it would be easier to maintain, and I liked the result. When Henry arrived at my apartment at 6 o'clock sharp, she didn't get out of the car but called out to me. The Lexus she drove stood out in my neighborhood. I wore a gray jacket and a matching turtleneck, thinking I looked good, though I had no real point of reference. As Henry drove, I asked her what I should expect for the evening. She explained that the first hour would likely be filled with socializing. "Don't get worked up," she said. "Most people here will be big, pretentious snobs. Avoid them if you can. Just stay close to me and keep the snobs away. You don't have to be in the spotlight, but don't let anyone push you around. Make sure I always have a drink in my hand, ginger ale or mineral water. Just be friendly and calm, and let them think we're a couple." I hadn't thought much about it before, but I agreed. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I was willing to play along. "Will they feed us?" I asked. "About an hour in," Henry replied. "We'll get some rubber chicken and some speeches. After that, they'll give us something else." It hit me then that I hadn't even complimented her on her dress or hair, which only made me feel more out of place. The first part of the evening played out exactly as she described. The room was full of men in expensive suits with flashy watches, and Henry stood out as one of the most attractive women there. It wasn't long before they began approaching her, trying to test the waters. I couldn't help but shoot them disapproving looks. To my surprise, every time I stepped away to refresh her drink, another guy would swoop in. Some even brought her drinks, which she calmly handed off to me to dispose of. Henry gave me a couple of quick glances and smiled. Finally, the 300 rubber chicken dinners arrived, and they were just as unappetizing as expected. I wasn't usually a picky eater, but this was something else. It wasn't long before Henry leaned over and asked, "Do you want to leave?" Without saying a word, I stood up, took her hand, and we quietly slipped out. In the garage, she kicked off her shoes and tossed me the keys to the Lexus. "Find us some real food," she said. 20 minutes later, we were sitting at Village Willie's, enjoying a full meal and a glass of beer. As we ate, I noticed something odd. Her evening gown had long sleeves, unlike the sleeveless dresses most women wore to events like this. She was also barefoot, but it didn't seem to bother her. The rest of the night went by comfortably, though it ended without any intimacy between us. We fell back into our usual routine at the gym. 3 weeks later, Henry needed an escort again, and I agreed. I decided to give my boss a heads up, and he found it amusing, telling me there was no need to formally request time off, just leave him a note. He basically said I was in charge of my own schedule. As for Henry's workouts, they were intense. She worked hard, sweat dripping as her heart rate increased, but she always wore sweatshirts and long pants. Meanwhile, the other women at the gym wore sports bras and shorts. It didn't make much sense to me, but I kept that observation to myself. Our second night was similar to the first, except there was no food, just more alcohol. And more booze meant more unwanted attention. Every guy who approached brought a fresh drink, and most of the evening I found myself collecting and disposing of glasses. One particularly obnoxious guy finally pushed me too far, so I took him aside and quietly warned him that if he ever harassed my fiancée again, I'd punch his face. After that, he disappeared for the rest of the night, like many others who had been lurking around. I didn't realize how intimidating I had become. After the event, we went out for sushi, though we ended up spending $40 on sashimi. It was another fun, platonic evening. 2 days later, Henry caught me off guard while I was rowing. "Why didn't you tell me we were engaged?" she asked. I was a bit embarrassed when one of my coworkers asked me that, but she didn't wait for an answer and just smiled. I called Nina later. She said Diana had been avoiding her and Caroline, and all Nina knew was that Diana had been traveling a lot and hosting people at her house. I asked if her mother had filed for divorce, but she didn't know. It had been weeks since she'd heard from Diana. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. As I emptied more bottles, my frustration grew. The next morning, I sent 74 valve stems to Grant Thompson at Kingston Industries, with a short note. Thanks for a fun evening. It had been over a year since that party, but I was sure he remembered it. I skipped the gym that day. I wasn't in the mood to work out with a hangover. The following day, I got a call from Henry. I promised to explain everything the next time we had dinner together. She picked me up at 6 p.m. and took me to Chris's Steakhouse, a place I had never been before. She listened silently as I explained things, not making any judgments. After dinner, I got back to my apartment just in time for my shift at work. The next day at the gym, Henry asked me if I knew anyone who had been at the cabin that night. When I told her I had the names and addresses of everyone who was there, her eyes lit up. After our training session, she stopped by my place and I gave her an envelope with 12 car registration sheets. She grabbed them eagerly and kissed me on the cheek. There are many types of lawyers, Henry said, explaining that she was a personal injury lawyer. She tried to explain it to me, but I just smiled and asked, "What's it going to cost me?" All I got in response was another kiss on the cheek. 3 days later, I got a call from my daughter Caroline. Diana had reached out to ask if Caroline knew where I was. Apparently, there was a problem at Diana's workplace, and she was in the middle of it. She was upset and wanted to talk to me immediately, but Caroline refused to give her any information. I couldn't help but wonder if Grant had received those valve stems. I called Henry and told her I'd pick her up in 20 minutes. Her office was in an upscale shopping center, nice, but not too flashy. Henry had never seen a Challenger before, and the sound of the engine caught the attention of a few curious onlookers. As she walked to the car, I walked around to open the door for her, smiling at the gawkers. Henry laughed as she got in and said, "Well played, Edward. Well played. I suppose you'll want an engagement ring now," she asked. "In due time," I replied. "Take your time." I kept the Challenger under control until we crossed the Tennessee River, then I gave it a little more gas. Highway 72 leading into Huntsville was a good stretch of road, but not the best place to show off. 2 hours later, we were sitting in dreamland. "All the people who were at the cabin that night have been served today," Henry said. "Served?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "It's a lawsuit. The actual term is malicious behavior contributing to the deterioration of a marriage. Does such a thing really exist?" I asked. "It appears that all the necessary categories have been met. Their behavior was intentional, extreme, and caused you severe emotional distress. That must be why my wife was upset," I muttered. "What do you mean, your wife was upset?" Henry asked. "My daughter Caroline called me today. Diana needed to talk to me. There's a big problem at work, and somehow, she's involved in it. I'm not sure about the details, but Grant Thompson and Kingston Industries are being sued for $1 million, while the other 11 people are facing lawsuits for $100,000 each. I couldn't help but ask Henry, "Do you really think this is going to work?" She confidently replied, "Of course it will. It won't be easy, but I think it'll lead to some interesting developments." As we left the restaurant, I felt a bit nervous and casually asked Henry if she wanted to get a room and come back in the morning. She replied, "I'd like to, but I can't. If you want, we can leave early," but it was clear that wasn't the point. "Let's just go," she added. "I'll explain everything on the way home." The car ride was quiet for about 20 minutes before she started talking. Henry shared that 8 years ago, she had weighed almost 300 pounds and chose diet and exercise over surgery to lose weight. She had shed 140 pounds, but it came with the challenge of 20 pounds of excess skin. It took 5 surgeries to remove the extra skin, leaving her with scars all over her body. Henry, being brave and outspoken, admitted she felt self-conscious about her scars and had avoided dating or interacting with male friends. Despite this, she felt comfortable around me, though she wasn't sure why. After dropping her off at her house, I walked her to the door and kissed her lightly on the cheek. She thanked me for dinner, and as I left, I noticed a small tear in her eye. We continued our platonic relationship, both content with the dynamic. Meanwhile, Jack's Markets, which had expanded by adding 2 stores in less than 2 years, offered me a full-time position as inventory manager. They required me to become a permanent employee, which meant being fully legalized, and I agreed. A few weeks passed, and I didn't hear from my daughters until I received a text saying, "Mom got fired." This made things more complicated, as I now had a steady job and Diana was out of work. I worried it might affect my divorce. Then Henry shared some good news. 3 of the 11 people we had sued had settled. Their insurance companies advised them to pay the $100,000 each to avoid a public lawsuit. Henry had already received 3 checks, and she anticipated more. I asked, Do you think this is connected to Diana getting fired? She confirmed, yes, of course it is. I asked Henry, is this going to mess up my divorce? She asked if I had filed the papers yet, and I said no. Well, let's take care of that, she smiled. Pack a bag and get the Challenger ready. We're visiting your wife. We left early Thursday morning, checking into the Sharon Hotel after a long drive. The next day, I called Caroline to arrange for Diana and Nina to have lunch. Dinner that evening was awkward. We avoided addressing the elephant in the room, the fact that Henry and I had spent our first night together in over a year. We had been friends without benefits before, and neither of us wanted to make the situation uncomfortable. The night turned out better than expected, though. Despite being a bit rusty, we managed to get through it. Henry seemed relieved that I wasn't disgusted, and I was happy it wasn't as bad as I had feared. We were a couple of happy fools. The next morning, we had a late breakfast. Diana and the girls were already at the table, and I looked good in my new sport coat with a dark turtleneck. Henry was dressed in a light business suit, casual yet professional. Diana, Caroline, and Nina were visibly surprised by my appearance. I introduced Henry to my family. Diana, Caroline, Nina, this is Harlan Carter, my confidant and attorney. Harlan, these are my wife Diana and daughters Caroline and Nina. It was awkward, but it was the best I could do. Before the silence could stretch further, the waiter arrived to take our order. Diana quickly broke the tension, saying, I'll just have coffee, and I quickly added, just bring us 5 cups of coffee and leave the coffee pot on the table. The waiter nodded, and everyone seemed to relax. Diana smirked slightly and asked, Bill, could you tell us what you've been up to the last few years? I replied, just working and giving you the freedom to find yourself or whatever. Henry lightly kicked me under the table, and I could feel the tension rising. I needed you, and you left me, she said, her voice steady. Maybe you needed someone, but not me. Mom, Dad, drop it, Caroline interrupted, sensing the growing discomfort. I'm sure you didn't set up this meeting to sit around and tease each other. Dad, why are we here? Caroline's persistence made it clear this meeting wasn't going to last long. I felt at a loss for what to do next. I glanced at Henry, hoping for some direction, but she ignored me and took charge of the conversation. Henry pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table toward Diana. Mrs. Adams, this is a divorce petition. I think you'll find it very fair. I suggest you take it to your attorney for review. Nina and Caroline looked shocked, clearly not expecting this turn of events. Diana, on the other hand, smiled broadly but didn't take the envelope from Henry. Instead, she reached into her own purse and pulled out an envelope. You're stupid, she said. I divorced your weak ass 8 months ago for desertion. You never got a copy because I didn't know where to send it. That's final. Anyway, you don't have anything left to claim. Her smile turned into a wide grin as the waiter returned with our coffee and a vase for the table. Just as Diana stood up, she smiled at Henry and me and gave the girls a strange look before walking away, leaving both envelopes behind on the table. Can we stay for lunch? Nina asked, looking at the waiter. I heard they have really good custard pie here. Henry and I laughed, then asked the waiter to bring the menu. Nina, Caroline, and Henry enjoyed a lively conversation over lunch, while I felt like I was eating alone, lost in my thoughts. I never quite understood women. Afterward, the girls exchanged phone numbers and promised to stay in touch. Back in my room, I started packing. Edward, I thought we were staying one more night? Henry asked, noticing my hurried movements. We are, but not here, I replied, urging her to hurry. Pack up. An hour and a half later, we were driving to Elton, Maryland. 30 minutes later, Harlan Carter became Henry Adams again. We spent the night in Luray, Virginia, in a house with a 3-car garage, a whole other story. It wasn't long before I learned that Diana had a seizure upon hearing that I had received over $1.5 million from Kingston Industries. Diana moved to Iowa shortly after, though I never knew why. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.